I'll do that.
Um, and yeah, and we can kick off and do the intro part as well about our discussion about what we think a pinup is as well, because I think that would be good for context for everyone and for them to share their thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
Okay. Are you kicking off? Am I kicking off?
you're kicking off, yeah? Go for it.
Okay. So really excited to be here with MakeFest talking about pinup art. So just to introduce myself, my name is Emily and I'm a graphic designer. And I also do illustration and I have a big love for pinup art, also historically and socially and what that means today. So I'm really excited to just bring it all up in this session we're having and hopefully start a discussion around what it means today in society and to you if you enjoy pinup art. So let's get started. Anton, did you want to
Oh yeah,
set?
so to start it off, for people watching the recording, we're gonna be having a discussion about this, and it's really about capturing your perspective about pinup art and what it means to you, and what are the things that pop to your mind when you think about pinup art, and then we can see if that changes at the end of this talk once you've got a bit more context. Um, and so yeah, so I'll kick us off with my sort of thoughts. Um, yeah, it for me when I seen the name of the talk, pinup art, it made me think of um, kind of old school illustrations from like old postcards, that type of thing, where like women are portrayed in a very sort of cartoonish, over embellished way of like really thin waists um,
Yeah,
and wide hips. That popped to mind as just as an image, um, and kind of like maybe a bit more modern is like the like sort of tattoo type style. So like I had a PE teacher who had like a pinup girl tattoo on his leg. So when I was like 11, I just thought that was super interesting. I was like, whoa, okay, like what does that mean? Is he part of a gang? I don't know.
yeah.
um, and yeah, and then also I was interested about the discussion about that, about kind of um, how women feel about pinup art and about how it portrays, like, is it celebrating um, femininity? Is it empowering? Is it derogatory? Like, what are people's views on that? Um, uh, yeah, and also just doing a bit of research, I noticed that there was a lot of kind of pin-up girls used in like war propaganda, of like riding missiles as a horse, or like you should sign up today, and it's like this pin-up lady encouraging people to join the army. So I think the whole subject's kind of interesting and has so many different angles.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's my
Um,
sort of entry to that.
yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, I guess, you know, before even kind of going into what maybe technically or not technically defines pinup art, just have a think about what you think makes a pinup a pinup. I'll go into it a bit more. I'll open up a PDF, we'll go through some images, but even before you see anything, you probably already have this idea of a typical pinup girl and, maybe what she needs to look like. But, today that could be anything and it doesn't even need to be a woman. So it's definitely interesting to compare the expected image of a pinup girl and what pinup art was and what it had to be at one point in history and what today it can be, absolutely anything. Um, so yeah, I would love to share some history about pinup art in general because I think it helps give context to where it is now, but also kind of illustrates the intentions of pinup art and what makes it different from just an illustration of a woman. So if that sounds good, or if anyone else wants to, you know,
Yeah, so I'll share my quick sort of expectations of what I think would classify as pinup art. just in my mind would be like kind of a sexy lady in a kind of provocative pose um, that somebody pins up on their wall. That's my sort of antiquated vision of a pin-up.
Yeah, and I think that would be for most people as well. Sexy is definitely part of it, but again, what sexy means has always changed throughout the 20th century,
Right.
and before that as well, when we first started seeing illustrations and photographs of women. So yeah, the definition of sexy, the definition of provocative, um, they're just all the time in motion, which is kind of exciting to compare like what got people interested 100 years ago versus now. Um, but it's definitely part of that discussion. So, so yeah, I have to agree with you, whatever it means. Um, so maybe now's a good point then just to start running through, some history. It's should be pretty cool. I'm gonna share my screen.
Awesome.
So, do you want to share the entire screen? Yes.
I'm gonna jump off the spotlight. Um, there you go.
Okay. Oh, I'm sharing my screen now. Okay. I'm now opening this PDF, so you should be able to view everything. Can I just do a sound check? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. All good.
Okay, I don't know. Oh, that's quite okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine.
Yeah, I can hear you, by the way. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Because now I have total silence. I can't see anything. Oh no, I just did it. Sorry, technical issue. That's fine. Cool. Let's get started. So, the first question, which is probably like one of the first questions people ask when they're trying to define a pinup girl or illustration, what makes it different from just an illustration of a woman or a photo of a woman? So something to consider, I guess, because now we see a lot of art that's created around women and women's bodies, and it's just kind of hashtagged as a pinup. Um, but we rarely kind of stop and consider what actually makes it pinup-esque versus just a figure drawing or life drawing or just any kind of illustration. So we're just comparing these two famous ladies. So Girl with a Pearl Earring on the left from the 17th century, and then Betty Grable, who was considered kind of one of the main figures of the pinup era in 1942. So yes, they're both illustrations in a sense of women. For me, when I think about it, I compare it in a way between art and design. So design usually for me has more of a brief sometimes than art. And I think that's what's kind of the spice of the pinup, if I were to try and describe it. I think a pinup tries to tell a story, tries to have an identity, there's a character, and in that sense can hold a lot of power, which is what it was used for, especially in advertising. And even as you mentioned before, things like war propaganda. So if Girl with a Pearl Earring was printed in the 40s in America, would she have the same level of influence? Maybe, but I think there has to be something in this connection with the viewer, which pinup art tries to capture so well. I think which it does capture so well. And of course, stop me if you have any questions or want to bring up anything.
Oh yeah. So just on that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fascinating. That comparison between art, which is kind of just an expression, whereas something like pinup art is a bit more persuasive and like you say, like the brief is get these people to do something or whatever. So I think that's super interesting. Yeah, the difference as a definition as well. I hadn't thought about that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think because of the way pinup art was used, it just becomes so tied to that art form. It's now I think it's enjoyed nostalgically just as an image, but at the time it was definitely part of a bigger movement, I guess. So we're talking about what makes a pinup a pinup. These are all examples of pinup art, and they are spread out across all the decades of the 20th century, even pre-20th century. Um, and you can see there's like this wood engraving, you've got watercolor, you've got photography, and they're all expressions of the pinup. Even though you've got this range of maybe mostly covered to mostly uncovered, or shy or not shy. Um, but in you know, I think what again connects all of these characters and women is that they they speak to you. They have to speak to you in some way. They're making contact with you as a viewer, and they're speaking to their audience at that time in history, which again is a really powerful tool. So whether that's for the sake of advertising something, or it's for just creating some sense of arousal, or just giving you some pleasure in looking at her, um, it's this kind of contact, I would say. Again, telling a story, having a brief behind each piece that makes them typically pinup esque. Yeah, cool. And I just wanted to throw this in there because this is actually the first illustration on record of sexual appeal in advertising. So this is from late 15th century.
Whoa.
Uh, and it's this, I guess you could call it like a leaflet or something at the time. And it was for a translation of a Belgian book. So it is a scene from the book, but it was kind of obvious for this illustrator to put not just a naked woman, but a naked woman bathing, suggestively, holding, her body in that way. So it was, intended to help sell this book translation. So just dropping that in there. Didn't have any, I think, direct influence on pinup art, later on. But I guess you can say it's been sex appeal in advertising is not that new
Yeah.
in that way. So pinup, as the name suggests, it really could be any image that you would pin up on the wall. But what that also means is it's not intended for a gallery or for the street. If it's supposed to be pinned up, then it implies it needs to be printed in a way. So pinup art really first starts being seen properly with the birth of new printing techniques. So that's more like late 20th, 19th century. And you have this explosion in magazines, periodicals, posters. It's like the birth of modern advertising. So what all these magazines and companies start to find out is that there's a better response for advertising products and for selling magazines that have women on them, and especially women in more alluring kinds of poses, and they seem to work really well for men viewers and for women viewers. So there's a new demand for illustrating women and for artists who can draw women in that way. And you've got this whole range of amazing art from that era. And a lot of this earlier art, these earlier references, bring these women who are more associated with, I'd say, like less reputable industries at that time, like entertainment, theater, burlesque. But they're effective, and they're also just really beautiful. So this is kind of what gets people comfortable at looking at the woman in print. Although these are all drawn by men at this point, and actually through most of the 20th century, anyways. But this is what kind of paves way, I guess, for the next stage. So let's meet the Gibson girl. She's known as the first pinup, basically. She gets launched in Life magazine in 1887. She's drawn by Charles Gibson, and she ends up staying in print for over 20 years, which is incredible. Nothing really sexual about her, but she's still regarded as a pinup just because of how much mass appeal she had to readers. So she'd appear, in every issue, sometimes with friends or family. She rocked the latest hairstyles. She was well-mannered. She was ambitious, intelligent. She had her own character. And I think that's what really helps define the modern pinup. We'll call it modern because at that time it was. And even just relating it to knowing that men liked looking at her and women wanted to look like her. And that held so much influence in uh, 20th century America at that time that it just told magazines and companies and brands, yes, okay, let's keep using women. They're doing a good job for us, basically.
Just a question on that. So the Gibson girl, so she was a real lady. Um,
No, she was totally fictitious. Sorry, I didn't mention
okay.
that. Totally made up. Just illustrated by this man. Uh, and she just looked really pretty and she was drawn really well. And she just ended up getting featured as an illustration in every
Wow,
issue of this magazine.
that's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're just really beautiful drawings as well if you just want to check them out at some point. So that opens up this whole new wave of what is regarded as the golden era of pinup art. So you've got a few decades in mid-century, mid 20th century America, especially, of woman after woman after woman, selling everything from Coca-Cola to Ford to war, joining the war effort, um, and even just as paintings and images in their own right. And these are all again created by men, but not. I think unlike before, um, when these artists were a bit more alternative or underground, these were all highly established, highly sought after, well paid artists who were in such demand because this was the effect that these illustrated women were having on the advertising boom at that time. So they're all traditionally very well liked. They've got this all American character, which is supposed to represent this fun, bubbly, social um, style of lady. And again, it may not have spoken to everyone at that time, but it had a huge influence on advertising. And I think a lot of the art in that era as well. Um, and that just continues, and it still continued into advertising into the 60s even. But there's also this other medium, it's the camera, that starts to compete with how effective this form of art is for some types of audiences. So, hello, Playboy. Um, so some people actually call Playboy and then photography the death of the pinup. I wouldn't say so, but it's definitely up for discussion. Would you get the same thing out of an illustrated woman if you have a photo? Maybe, maybe not. So Marilyn Monroe posed in the first issue of Playboy. She was not famous yet, and she really needed car payments. So this was the first example of naked photography in a commercial magazine or publication, which is a really big deal at the time. And then along with Playboy and then a bunch of other, magazines, Esquire and Penthouse, and this whole wave of photography and later video, it opens up this, a different art form. You could say it's erotic. You could say it's connected, even to porn. Um, and I think that also sometimes overlaps with what people think of as pinup art, when it may sometimes be, and maybe sometimes it's just different. Um, but it's also a valid stage of that history. And and here we are today. We can draw and take photos and take videos of anything we want to, not just of women and not just to sell anything, but just to like for the pleasure of a naked person in itself. These are all words that are associated with pinup art, and they're almost at odds. Some of them are almost at odds with each other. Like you've got innocent and provocative, and you can kind of see historically how some could be one or the other. Um, but again, like in the same way we can use this to describe pinup art, I think this is also sometimes describing um, how a woman is represented, and it's part of this wider discussion of what that means today, I think.
Where are these? So those words, where did they come from? Is this from? Yeah, like how did you get to these words?
So these were mostly all found in descriptions from pinup artists and of pinup art throughout the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's a lot of it's commentary. Um, it's really interesting actually to see this variety of opinion. I was actually going to share this one specific quote that was basically this claim that pinup art was expressing men's dominance over women, and that was it. There was no discussion around that. There was nothing enjoyable about pinup art for women, which I think today could be argued with because it's actually still very popular with women, and it made a big influence on women in the 20th century in terms of how they wanted to even to dress and how they wanted to be perceived as. So it's a I guess it's a very quite can be quite a deep subject.
Yeah,
It's
I agree. When I was thinking about like what, the first prompt about what comes to mind, like there is a lot of conflicting thoughts, and there's like the straight up image of what you think of, but then there's also like, oh, there's different sides to this. So yeah, it's kind of a yeah, it's an interesting subject. Like it's deep. Yeah.
yeah, and it's really interesting like when you even consider like this aspect of pinup art being mass distributed. Um that's a big shift from, like a painting of a woman, like a historical painting,
Mm.
or like a hand-drawn leaflet that's done in like, I don't know, the 18th century, and there's only a few of them to go around. But when you have a subject that's going to be spread across the country or across Europe, um, it some people found that as a cheapened version of art, which, you know, yeah, it was cheap to get. It doesn't make the subject cheap, but
Mm.
it made it very accessible. So it's a interesting. Um, so I guess like some questions I want to open up, which I still think about, and I'd love to, keep considering, I guess, is what place pinup art holds in culture today. Um, you know, I think pinup art's created a genre in its own right of this, as you said, this classic nostalgic, woman who seems kind of innocent, but she's got this peekaboo moment of like, oh, she's flashing a leg. Like we kind of expect what pinup art looks like in our head, but like how that really translates into a woman today or anyone today in that art form, like how relevant is that? Would it still sell the same way? Um, Things like advertising. Again, when we go back to this idea of a pinup holding a lot of power, um, that was exploited in advertising, I would say, because the subject, this woman, would create this emotional response from the viewer, and how far is that taken? Like in this BP ad from the 70s, I mean, it's so explicitly sexual, but if it works, is that valid? And does this make it um, any different from a drawing doing that in the 40s? So, do you have any thoughts on that, or does anyone?
Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, it depends what you're measuring by, right? And it's like if you're measuring like the success of an advert, and you test out a bunch of them, and then like this option actually does appeal to the masses, which is your mission, then it's like, okay, good and good for you, but I guess it's like you have a responsibility, because if BP are putting out a message to, like you say, the whole of America, or in this case Spain or whatever, then it's like they have a responsibility of like who's seeing that, right? Of like different generations, and what influence that has. And so, okay, you might have accomplished your mission. You drove more sales and more eyeballs or attention, but um, but yeah, then it has this sort of effect. And I guess it's definitely still relevant, because looking at these, like you were saying before, is like this is the early drawings and stuff. That was kind of the birth of it. But if you think about anything that's, they all have aspects of this sort of pin-up idea in the way that you described it, you know, of like having a connection and an emotional response to something.
Yeah, I guess, and I personally think that still holds true today, and it probably always will, just because we know that it works. But in terms of how it works on us, or how much it should work on us, I guess it's like up for the future, basically. So yeah, I basically kind of dropped these sorts of topics, and it's something I'm constantly seeing being questioned generally. Like obviously, it's always in discussion, these issues, from a lot of different perspectives. But I think in art, and in pinup art being this very specific niche within that, I think these are all really valid topics to consider. Um, we've gone through some of these examples, but of course, they're so focused on the American audience. They've traditionally come from that commercial, advertised image. So there's a lot of influence from that. But today, it's opened up to so many more interpretations of what makes a pinup. And I guess there's a lot you could say on each topic, but it's exciting, like to see today so many various types of artists, men, women, non-binary, creating art around the body, but trying to give a story to a character, and then deciding what effect they want that to have on the viewer as well. These are just like, I honestly have so many people I follow. I would love to just share more. These are specifically women. And again, I think it's interesting. Most of pinup art has been created by men. And it's helped dictate what men want to look at, and what women want to look like. And some of that is still kind of obvious in pinup art today. It's this lean towards the more traditional nostalgic view of that, and then some of it's a bit more interpreted and looser. And you can see that in comic art as well, and cartoons, and it's obviously as diverse as art is today. But I think just particularly looking at how women are drawing women, it's really cool.
It is.
And then, yeah, I guess as a last kind of question, if a pinup represents values or characteristics, or has a story, then like what characteristics would you pin up?
Nice.
What do you think would represent a person today, or a woman today? Whatever matters more to you. I think it probably isn't just about image, and whatever else is important to you, then I think can be reflected in the art that you create. So yeah.
Nice. Well,
that's it. Yeah.
That was so good. I've got a ton of questions.
Oh my god! Yay! Wait, I'm gonna find you and then stop sharing.
Yeah. Okay, and I'll turn my video on as well. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And I was hoping that you'd have references, because when I Google searched it, it was just like a hot mess of, I had no navigation of.
It is a hot mess. I know.
Of like where anything came from, and then there was some really crazy stuff, and there was some other. So yeah, really, really interesting. I wonder, is there a way for us to both have our screen big like this? I don't want to see my face like that.
Are you sharing your screen?
I'm not sharing my screen. No, it's just because like now when I'm talking to him, we're just seeing the. It's okay.
Okay.
This is the audio part. Cool. So yeah. So I did have a question of like what are the sort of modern examples that are out there, that are that are responding to the types of things that you said, the kind of body image, diversity, gender, feminism, empowerment? Is there artists that I could look at that are sort of tackling those types of issues directly?
Yes, I have a bunch. I'll just kind of throw it out there as well. I started an Instagram page
Oh,
that
cool.
it's called Girls Who Draw Girls, and the idea was to feature more women artists
Cool.
or artists who identify as women who are making art around women. Um, and
Awesome.
I think that was a really helpful exercise for me when I started that, because I think one, you notice that even now there's definitely way more men who draw women.
Right.
Um, because why not? I guess. But the interest around drawing women, I guess, has always been there. But the way women draw women, it's just different. It's a lot more. It's way more diverse. You see way more body types. You see women from all sorts of backgrounds. You see it. You see women and not necessarily always glamorized. Um, just a lot more real and relatable. Uh, and then sometimes this balance of being sensual and sexual. I guess a lot of the time, I think women find it easier to describe a more sensual mood or feeling,
Mm.
and a lot of men artists will, focus more on the body itself, and that aspect of just sex,
Yeah.
explicitly. So it's I guess like that's one platform that comes to mind. But in general, there's just a lot of professional and amateur artists who.
Yeah, I've just jumped on there and followed you. Yeah, this is amazing. I'll definitely link this out to everyone along with the recording. But I do have more questions.
Yeah, please.
um, so like yeah, given that you've showed us the history, or the brief history of pinup art, um, what do you think the future of pinup art is, like with the advent of um, like virtual reality, artificial intelligence, deep fakes, all this crazy shit that's going on.
Oh, great
Like,
question.
do you think, yeah, like how does the pinup then evolve into that sort of more virtual world? Do you think?
I think as long as we're using art to express ourselves and express, or at least to represent a woman or even a person at this point, then any interpretation is valid. It doesn't necessarily hold the same commercial purpose as it once did, just because we now have so many ways to market and advertise, I guess. Um, but I think, well, VR, honestly, I don't know that much about directly. Um, I'm excited to see someone just, you know, take that on. And again, I think pinup art, because it's been almost exclusively around women, even if there's pinup art around men, I think the the relevance it has for women today and how it represents women today and in future, I feel like that will always be more of a focus of the discussion, because it has influenced women, so much over the 20th century, and helped define them in a way. And it's like now we're at a point where women could, in reverse, define what pinup art does or what that means.
Right.
Um, so yeah, how that's going to be through virtual reality, I don't know yet.
Yeah.
If anyone knows, I'm so excited to see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess everything will somehow be translated over, but I guess what's what's interesting about what you're saying is it's more about, less about the medium, more about the message, more about the values it portrays. And like you say, as more and more, because it, like you said, it started off with like, the woodblock example, but then all of the illustrations, the Gibson girl, um, they were all drawn or created by men, And then now the so they're prescribing their ideals or what the viewer's ideals are, and then over time that's kind of empowering women in a certain way of like, oh, I'd like to be like that. I'd like to be have that strong character to do those things. But then now it's women are drawn women, and then so they now have the pen to write the future kind of thing. That
Yeah.
um,
Um, I guess that's kind of the, like, in the same way we try to describe what makes a pinup. I mean, whatever makes a pinup a modern pinup is really dependent on that generation, because it always did change. You know, what made a pinup effective or nice to look at really depended on the audience at that time.
right.
And I don't see why today would be any different.
Mm,
If people are still making art around women and women's bodies, then it's still up for discussion. Okay, well, what do men want to see, and what do women want to see? What do we want to show? Um, and yeah, I think maybe that's the bottom line with all art today. It's just whatever you're trying to show, just think about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And my last question that I had was putting that question back on yourself of like what characteristics
Oh,
what characteristics would you pin up? What would you be looking for in a pin up?
um, I I personally always was attracted to strength. Um, so I think just I mean, just in general, I'm attracted to people and women who are stronger characters, who, you know, who kind of know themselves. And I feel like even in illustration, um, I guess I also I do gravitate towards illustrations of women who have a particular focus or strength about them, which you can't quite maybe pin down what it is, but you just create your own connection uh, with that character. Um, so for me, I don't know if strength is it's quite a big word, but I I think for me that is more important maybe even than how she looks
Right.
or what her body shape is, or those qualities. It's like a feeling that I want to get out
Yeah.
of that. So like even in my studio, I've got a bunch of just postcards and just illustrations of just these like really great looking women. They're just giving you this focus, and I just like motivated. Yes, okay, they're looking at me. And so that gives me more joy, I think, than
Mm.
seeing like a flat image without that soul. So
And yourself, do you draw, illustrate pin-ups? And if so, where can I see them?
uh, I I love drawing women. I've always been drawing women. I don't know what it is, like what this obsession with drawing women is like. Probably started from like since I was drawing or holding a pen. Um, there are a few on my Instagram. I don't post as many, um, but I think it's just really it's just fun basically. Nothing professional. Again, there's a bunch of really amazing professional pinup artists today, um, and yeah, just for myself, I guess I just like to, yeah, it's just doodling, I guess. What about you? Do you draw? Do you draw
Um,
anything?
I honestly don't. I'm a designer by trade, and I very rarely draw. I doodle, I scribble, but yeah, I never. I didn't have like the self belief in that what I was drawing was like good enough as a kid. I don't know what. So I've just always taken
I
like a
think we're
sort
all
of.
like that.
I think
Yeah.
I've just taken like a jokey approach to it. So like I like to convey ideas, um, and whether that's through a sketch or a doodle or something um, more time consuming. But yeah, drawing. I don't. I sketch shit, and that's about it.
Well, that's totally valid. I think if we were like a big group, and I'm sure if we were all like sketching pinups, and even if there was like a stick figure, it would work. I
Just as
mean,
valid.
yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, what I'll do then as well is I'll share this recording around. Um, if you could share with me the PDF as well, I'd love to share that around. And we'll figure out some ways to prompt people on the social media and on the Design Calendar platform as well. I think it's a super interesting discussion. People are going to have a lot of different opinions, which I'm excited to hear. But thank you so much for putting the time and effort into it. And I think it's great what you've put together.
Thank you so, so much. Again, like it's such a new subject and there's barely anything out there about it, I feel. So it was really exciting to just pull things together and to kind of focus on it more properly as an artist today and not as like a historian or something. So it was really fun. I'll share the PDF. I'll share my Instagram handle as well if anyone is watching later and wants to just reach out, talk about anything, share anything. And obviously as well with MakeFest. So yeah, I'm excited to see if we get a little group going out of interest. So
yeah, we will do for sure. Okay, I'm gonna cut it off there, but have a great day and enjoy the rest of the festival.
you too, have an awesome week.
All right, see you later.
Bye.
Bye.